Kaya papunta tayo ng bat. Yan. That's it. Going to bat, BHH. Kalimutan mo na yung mga reflection, basta tuloy-tuloy mo na lang. Yung road, yung road yan, makikita lang yung left hand drive, yung gano'n, makita lang nila yan. Ay, yung country yan. Sign. Naka-record ba siya?
Yes. At the sign na number.
Yung paligid yan, yung maganda yan. Yung castle na yan. Ako naman lang yung bundok na yun. Sige, punan na yung kotse.
Parang ano dito,
Makita na lang yung left side ng
residential.
driving. Baliktad ang driving dito.
Mamaya, to take ulit tayo sa ano naman.
Yeah, welcome to Pat.
Yan,
Yan.
welcome to Pat. Okay, tumitigil tayo.
May 2-course lunch break, $4.99. Yan, ako naman yan.
City.
We're now in
Wala
Bath.
masyadong tao ngayon kasi it's Monday, Tuesday. So, nasa trabaho lahat, di ba?
Yeah.
Kaya mostly mga tourist to.
Ito yung dating Roman baths. May mga ano rito.
Pwede tayo dito maligo?
Hindi, historical na lang to.
Hindi ka pa naligo, no?
Hindi ko nga eh.
So, maligo pa dyan. Natin.
Sige, tuloy mo na. Matami ng mga oras eh. So kahit tuloy-tuloy mo na sir, wala nang problema. Huwag ka na mag-save ng batteries. Tagal pa yan. I-record mo lang all the while. Yung entire trip.
Sana yung kanina. Mamaya na.
Para makita lang yung buong city. Bigyan mo na. Huwag mo
Yeah, ito,
patayan.
we're going to the city. Ganda ng buildings, no? Parang quiet town to. Safeway pala, oh.
Oh, may Safeway pala rito.
Kaya umalis na yan sa atin. Dito pala lumipat.
Lumipat sa England ah.
Yan. Iba naman ang colors ng mga buildings nila. Parang one color lang ha. Ito yung bus naman nila. Ito yung parang tourist bus ng bus. Ito may tavern.
Nakalaman ko sa kanila. Pero hindi na ako makaka-navigate ha. Kasi nakikita ko. Bahala ka na lang. Yan ang countryside. Tigil tayo para kunin ang view. Yung bahay. Hindi siya cobblestone. Kuhaan ba siya? Naka-record?
Yeah. Ganda ng kulay, no? Yellow na may parang gold eh. Yellow green.
Pagdadrive. Dito mo?
Ang kikitid ng mga kalye. Nag-stop pa kami para daanin yung mga kotse. The King Edward School. Sa right side. Small community kasi country. countryside.
Kakain muna kami. Maganda. The bridge, kakain muna kami rito. The Water Wheel Restaurant. British Garden. May toll pa. Hindi tayo mag-boat cruise mamaya. Dito mo.
Okay, nagbayad na kami ng toll. 30 pence. Ito. Ang tititid na mga daan, paakyat. Mainit dito. Para mga 80 degrees. Pero nung umalis kami ng Central London, umuulan. Babalik ka din ulit? Sa 30 pence? Hindi, baka meron pa dun sa loob.
Well, isang pangalan dito. Dito lang tayo, di ba?
Pasok kami sa Old Mill Hotel.
Wala pa lang
Sa
parking.
private road. May water wheel restaurant. Okay, umikot na naman kami kasi hindi kami maka-parking. So, ito na naman kami. Shops. To your left. Mga kulay ng buildings nila parang yellow. Yellow na may halong brown. Shop sa baba. Yan o, Italian.
Kaya ba ito?
Daming turista pala.
Paano lang tao dyan?
Tayo kanina.
Para daan.
Napansin ko dito old buildings, no? Na wala masyadong garden sa kabilang side.
taken back and read. Now this was obviously a waste. And that's when someone came up with the idea of using stamps. Because we were the only nation in the world using stamps, we didn't bother to write the name of our country on the stamp. And that tradition still survives to this day. We are still the only nation not to write his name on the stamp. The mail was delivered to Bath by stagecoach. The stagecoaches used to pull underneath the arches there on the left, and those are the original stable yard and stable. The first stamp bought here in Bath was called a penny black after its colour and its price. It was sold at auction a few years ago and it fetched £55,000. 100 yards along the road on the right is the Museum of Bath, and in there, using very spectacular models, they try to display how 18th century Bath was created. And these are 18th century buildings either side of us now, built as lodging houses for the rich visitors in the 18th century. All made of the local stone, 5 levels, kitchen below ground level. The area to the right was used a few years ago for the filming of The House of Elliot, a programme produced by the BBC, a programme about fashion. And it's rather apt that we now approaching the museum. Jerry Halliwell, when it said it was addressed to me, it looked more like a headscarf tied in the middle. Next one. I have to come off the microphone here. I'll rejoin you in just a moment. It is designed by the John Woods. Paul has said because it's all on the round. This is where rich people used to gather in the 18th century to admire one another. And it's designed by the John Woods with just 3 entrances in, so that when you arrive at an entrance, you can see an exit on the opposite side. You stop to admire the architect's work. Unfortunately, in 1820, somebody went and planted the trees here, so now we can't see the woods for the trees. At the top of the building, stone acorns, I'll explain why later. 3 columns, 3 levels of floors. Still a residential area, and apartments sold on ground level sold last year for £625,000. Well, the road that we're following from the circus is a typical one of Bath from the 18th century. It's built on a slope, leading down into the city centre, and the houses are all of a similar kind. The architects were looking for uniformity, harmony of proportion. But the back of Bath houses are not nearly so elegant to look at. They were the work of hundreds of builders who were employed. And because there's a contrast between front and back, a strong contrast, we say Bath houses all have Queen Anne fronts, but Mary Anne's behind us. Queen Anne was the first monarch to come here. Mary Anne's were what they call servant girls. 25 was for a little while the lodging house of Jane Austen, perhaps our most famous lady writer. And just in front of us we have the Jane Austen Centre. There's a little model outside, and she's dressed in the style that Jane Austen would have been familiar with. Very elegant clothing. On the left, and 2 here on the right, buildings which are quite blackened. That's because at one time all the rooms would have been heated up by coal fires. When the fires were lit, smoke escaped into the atmosphere and blackened the building. 40 years ago, Bath banned coal fires, and so since those days, people have cleaned up the outside of their building. If you look behind the tree on the right, you can see what I mean about the back of Bath houses. We'll compare that with the front. This is the Jane Austen Centre on the left, but not our bus stop. We go just a bit further. Show your guide Friday ticket here, you'll get a small discount, which you will also get if you show your, if you want the Museum of Costume, and if you want the Museum of Costume and the Roman Baths, if you buy a combined ticket, you save yourself a couple of pounds. Look behind your right shoulders now. There the front of the building. Those are look like a palace, but in fact, 7 houses join one to another. So here's our stop for the Jane Austen Centre, which is just behind us. People could gather here to admire one another's fashion sense. And the hotel at the bottom end of the square is a replacement for a row of houses that was bombed during the Second World War. Only the last 3 houses survived. For a season, Jane Austen lived in the last one. Occupying the hotel in those days was a travelling group of ballet dancers. They were performing in the local theatre, and they had a lucky escape because in an air raid warning they decided to stay in the theatre rather than coming back to their hotel, which when they came back was completely flattened. Inside the square on the right is an obelisk, a column of stone raised this time to say thank you to the visit to Bath of Frederick, the Prince of Wales. And that meant that he should have become the king. But Frederick never succeeded to the throne because one day when he was playing a game of royal tennis, a ball much harder than the lawn tennis ball hit him on the face and produced a wound, which turned septic. The poison from that went up into his brain, and a few days later Frederick died. Now most British people were not at all upset by his death, because they neither liked him nor the rest of the royal family. But his grandfather, as father, King George I and George II, hardly ever set foot in England. They preferred to live in their native Germany, and they could speak very little English. So when Frederick died, a poet decided that he would take revenge on behalf of the nation upon the royal family. And so he wrote a memorial which said, "Here lies Prince Fred, who was alive but is now dead. Had it been his father, I would have much rather. Had it been his brother, or better than another, and had it been his sister, had it been a whole generation, it would have been better for the nation. But the last was poor Fred, who was alive but is now dead, and that's all that can be said." Behind the houses on the left-hand side is the William Herschel Museum. Herschel came to Bath from Germany as an organist, but his great interest, his great passion was astronomy. One evening, when he was sitting in his back garden here in Bath, looking up at the stars through a homemade telescope, he doubled the size of the known universe by discovering the planet Uranus. So he was now famous, he was made Astronomer Royal and knighted. There's a famous old photograph of Herschel's family standing inside one of his telescopes, which was 7 foot across. But the road that we're now going to take cuts in half the largest park in the city. It's named, park that is named after Princess Victoria, the Royal Victoria Park. She only came to Bath once as an 11-year-old girl to open up the park named after her. As she was stepping into her carriage to return home, the step was rather a high one, which meant that she had to lift up the hem of her dress. And when she did that, the naughty girl exposed her ankles. And when she heard that somebody had seen the ankles, she was very upset and said she'd never come to Bath ever again, and she never did. But although she ignored Bath, we didn't forget her. Over on the left-hand side is an obelisk put up to commemorate Victoria's coming of age. So although she ignored Bath, we didn't forget her. We're going to travel now along the Royal Avenue, and through the trees on the left-hand side is the Royal Crescent, the first crescent built anywhere in the world. Separating us from the houses is a low wall, and if you're a stranger to Bath and you walk from the houses down towards where we are now, when you reach that wall, you'll be so surprised you might want to say to yourself, "Aha, a wall here," and that's why it's known as the Ha-Ha Wall. Right opposite us now is only one doorway which is painted red. It's just behind one of the red cars. All the others are painted white. In the 1960s, when everyone was told to paint the door white, an elderly lady who lived there, she was a descendant of the Duke of Wellington, wasn't going to be told by anyone what colour to paint her door, so she painted it the brightest yellow possible. She was taken to court, she won her case, and it's remained yellow ever since. Right in the centre of the Royal Crescent is the Royal Crescent Hotel. So posh that it doesn't need to advertise itself. There's no sign that it's a hotel there, apart from the little man that will come out and carry your cases inside. The concession people. Concierge, I can't think of his name. Anyway, if you want to stay there, a double room is £200 per night, but will not include food, and the suite of rooms up to £800 per night, again without food. Number 1 of the Royal Crescent is a museum. All the fittings and furniture come from before the year 1800. This is so that our modern day visitors can see how our 18th century visitors would have lived. If you'd like to live in Royal Crescent yourself, well, if an entire house was to come on the market, it would probably fetch about £2 million to buy. Every year we try to make the city look attractive with flowers. Whenever we can, we enter a nationwide competition, but we won the prize. We were first last year, so we're not allowed to enter the competition for the next 2 years. Down on the left, this little hollow area, is the old dueling field. This is where, secretly, first thing in the morning in the 18th century, a young man would come and fight duels with pistols or with swords. Dueling and wearing a sword was by the master of ceremonies, Beau Nash. He wanted people to lead a very orderly life here. He didn't want them to be worried. So he banned the wearing of swords. And his idea was thought to be a good one, gradually spread to other cities and then eventually to other countries. On the right, another lovely display of flowers. These are not trays of flowers, incidentally. This is a tube with a flower basket. Just in front of us, on the right-hand side, when we completed the turn, there are two small buildings. In fact, they're unique. They've never survived anywhere else in the country. This is where the sedan chairman rest if they got tired from carrying you up into the hills, and they came back here and rested. And at the end of the road here, we have what are known as blind windows. These windows have never had glass in them. At one time, another house stood here, and when it was pulled down to make way for a new road into the park, instead of leaving behind a blank wall, they put in those false windows. But across the road on the left-hand side, there's another wall where windows have been blocked up with stone. But those windows have had glass in them. At one time in our history, there was a window tax. The king said that if you wanted to use up their light, then you must pay a tax on it. And the people who paid the tax called it daylight robbery, robbing them of their daylight. That's where the expression comes from. They were allowed to have 6 windows tax-free, but more than that, they were taxable. So the more windows there were in your house, the more tax you had to pay. See what I mean now about the trees hiding away the architect's work? When this area was originally designed, the visitors to Bath, when they were walking up this hill, would have a lovely view of the president in front of the trees. The high pavement to the left of us was designed for the young ladies to be able to walk along here without ruining their dressing. Because this street here would have been very busy with coaches and horses, all very dirty as well. So they walked up there. Now we're going to turn right into Milsom Street, our most fashionable shopping area. A street, incidentally, that was very popular with Princess Diana. When she lived in her country house in Highfield, which is 25 miles behind us, Diana was a regular visitor here. Halfway down on the left, we have a request stop if anybody wants to get off here. 2 passengers like to get off here, please. And on the other side of the road, from this bus stop, we have Jolly's. It's one of the oldest departmental shops in the country. It's owned by the same man that owns Harrods in London, so that's another connection with Diana. She was killed with this stuff. The frontage of the building is from 1879, but the shop is a lot older than that. Goodbye. The frontage is made of granite, and they represent all the different kinds of granite that can be found in Britain. If you're walking up this part of Bath, perhaps on another day, the National Westminster Bank, just in front of us on the left-hand side, has a beautiful ceiling made in the style of Wedgwood. Beautiful blue and white. And just in front of us on the left, but above us, you can see the original advertising from 1820. Advertising a library and a state lottery. In front of us is another advertisement on the top of a jewellery shop, the Royal Coat of Arms. Princess Victoria bought some bracelets here, so the shop was then able to advertise themselves by Her Majesty's appointment. Beyond that, with letters in gold, the Royal Mineral Water Hospital. That's where poor people were treated free of charge in the 18th century, provided they didn't come from Bath. Bath people were not allowed to be treated free. Now this is a research hospital into the illnesses, rheumatics and arthritis. Look to the right of you now, you see how narrow some of the streets are in this area. And why was it necessary for the sedan chair to be used to carry around the city? Too narrow for coaches and horses. Those streets are very popular with our passengers, especially that come from countries where they have to drive on the wrong side of the road. But there they don't have to worry about traffic. In front of us, Bath Abbey, over 60% of it made of glass, so you can admire what the architects have done inside. In front of us and above, carvings in the stone. Princess, that was at one time the school, the carvings tell us what subjects were taught. Up on the right now, Queen Victoria, still not happy with Bath and the deterrent. And in front of us, looking like a normal shopping street, this is actually a bridge with shops on either side. The Putney Bridge, one of only 3 bridges in the world, originally designed to carry shops and that still survive. One in Germany, the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, and the Putney Bridge in Italy. Down below us on the left, this is one of 9 River Avons that we have in England and Scotland. That's because the old word for river in our language was Avon. And if you go to Wales, where they still speak the language of heaven, where all the gentlemen are very charming for ladies and well educated. I am Welsh, by the way. The word for river is still Avon. So when we say the River Avon, we're making a language mistake. We say river or river. Now, if you look below us, you can see a narrow boat coming right up underneath our answer to the Niagara Falls. A narrow boat there, looking holiday home. You hire one of those at up to £1,000 per week, and then you navigate to travel longer. Well, from here, we're going to make our way up into the hills on the left hand. Halfway along that hill, you see a small gap in the trees, and there's a castle. If you went up to visit the castle, once you've gone through the front gates, you'll be very disappointed with what you see behind it. There's nothing there but an open space. It is a sham, a fake. It's known as Sham Castle. Built up there to advertise violence. Down on the in the second garden over there, there's another thing. There's a Roman centurion, and he's made completely of glass. Hundreds of glass being used. Down there on the left now. In front of us we have the Abbey Hotel. And to the right of it is a narrow street. To the right of it is a very narrow street. And if you were to walk down that street just a little way, you will come to the Sally Lunn's restaurant. And in there they sell a bun, which is also called a Sally Lunn. It was introduced to Bath in the 17th century. Until quite recently you could only buy it here in Bath. But in recent years it's also been introduced to Windsor. The bun is made of honey and flour and cream, and when it's cooked it's the size of a small plate. And you buy it either with something sweet spread across the top or something savoury. And if you stop outside Sally Lunn's restaurant and you look towards the top of the building, you will see a round hole. And in the hole is a stuffed owl. At one time, the streets of Bath and the orchards surrounding Bath were so full of rats and mice, owls were encouraged to nest in the city to help to keep down the number. Now the Sally Lunn got its name in an unusual way. As I said, it came from France in the 17th century when people in our country could read or write. If you wanted to advertise something new, then you went out into the street to sing out this phrase. The French lady thought that the bun, which when it's cooked has a golden top and a silver bottom, was like looking at the sun and the moon. So that's how she advertised it, singing out sun and moon in French. Soleil et lune, and that's now been brought to Sally. The people who live in the houses on the right, of course, don't look very dangerous, do they? But somebody gets drowned there every year. Over on the right-hand side, up in the distance, is the large country house that I mentioned to you earlier. Prior Park is actually a quarter of a mile long up there. We can only see about 20% of it from here. Now he is used as a school. To the right, this is where Bath plays cricket. If you're not familiar with cricket, here in England it's a rain-making ceremony. And to the left, our sports centre, which contains our swimming pool. Now, although we get lots of warm water coming out of the ground every day, we're not allowed to swim in the water. Because in 1978, one little girl died shortly after swimming in one of our old pools from meningitis. Investigation then discovered that the natural waters contained a microbe. And if, when you were swimming, that made its way up into your brain, then you stood a chance of having that deadly illness. So immediately all the old pools were shut down. Some of them are now being restored, and in November of this year, once again, we'll be able to swim in the water. This is because now we collect the water from below ground level. The microbe must have oxygenation, the passive transatlantic crossing in those days, which was 60 minutes. Now in front of us again, made of hundreds of plants, you see the coronation crown, commemorating 50 years that the Queen has been on the throne. As we go up into the hills, the houses will become more modern. So this is where we say goodbye to 18th century Bath, where the houses all joined one to another, no gardens in front. The Victorians in the 19th century didn't like living down in the valley here, it was too smoky. So they built detached houses up on the hillside. In fresh air and with nice views. And they were great travellers and they were inspired by what they saw in Northern England. The Right at the top of the hill we have the University of Bath, built in the 1860s. Just in front of us another 20th century building. You can tell by the whiteness of the Bath stone, which will gradually turn to a more biscuit colour. And behind this building, on the left and on the right, we have the River Avon. This is where you can hire a boat. With the invention of railways, this is how cargo will be carried across the country from west to east. The Bath has a legend to try to explain its origin. And our legend concerns Prince Bladud, who lived here about 400 years before the birth of Jesus. Now Bladud became a leper and his skin was affected. But when the rest of the tribe saw him, they were horrified, they were frightened, and so they banished him and he had to find a job. So Bladud became a swineman, which was a pig of a job. But in a very little while, all the pigs developed his illness, so he took them away from where people lived. And he went walking down in the valley. There they came across the hot mud, bubbling from out of the ground. And soon the pigs were soon rolling about in the mud and covered themselves with it. And they refused to move when the prince wanted them to do later in the day. It was then Bladud noticed that there were some oak trees growing close by. And he knew pigs loved eating acorns which grew on the oak tree, so he made a trail of food away from the mud. The pigs followed this trail, and when they reached the trees, they began to rub themselves against them. Of course, the mud came off their body, but there was no sign of the disease underneath. So Bladud decided that he would copy the pigs by covering his own body with mud. Later in the day, when that had all dried upon his skin, he began to peel it away. And underneath, he found that he also had been cured. So he was now able to return to his tribe. Eventually, he became their leader, and he built a temple at the site where he was cured. And that is supposedly the beginning of life. But if you believe that, you believe anything. That's a legend, and John Wood reminds us of that story when placing acorns on the top of the building in the cellar. Like all good legends, there's probably an element of truth. If you look to the left now, this is one of the Victorian houses that I mentioned to you at the bottom. See, it's very different in style to the buildings that we've been passing by. Several more like it as we go up the hill. There's a particularly grand building behind this one on the left, where we can only see the bare outlines of the theatre. Built in the Italian style, the Victorians were great travelers. At the top of the hill, the University of Bath. From the 1960s, nowadays we have over 10,000 students here studying science and engineering. The University of Bath is a centre of excellence in sport. 3 of the students won medals at the Sydney Olympics, 1 gold, 1 silver, 1 gold. They have an Olympic-sized swimming pool here, 50 metres long, and a lot of other facilities as well. And they're hoping to have, very soon now, an indoor athletics track. Once again, on the right, learning inspired by God. And a half an hour's walk in front of us is probably the finest American museum outside the United States. In the 1960s, 2 American gentlemen thought that British people should know something about American culture. So they bought Claverton Manor, and 18 rooms have now been filled of decorative art that the Americans produced between the 17th and the 19th century. Those rooms full of shaken furniture, quilts and embroideries. Now if I manage to persuade you to come to retire to Bath, maybe you'd like to buy a house. One on the right is for sale at nearly £1 million. The only shame is they can't spell the word present. It's a new spelling for Bath. Present there is minus the C it should have in the middle. When I come off the microphone here, I'll rejoin you at the bottom of the hill. It takes us 2 minutes to get there. 30 seconds if the brakes fail again, which is why I must now go downstairs for safekeeping. This is where we stop to admire the view, and if you're a photographer or you just want to have a look at panoramic view, then please stand and walk around the top deck. It will be safe to do so just here. We're looking down onto the city, which has a population of 85,000, and right in the middle of Bath, for our American visitor, perhaps I should say downtown, you'll see the Abbey. And on either, just to the left of the Abbey, is a red crane. That's where they're restoring some of the old pools. Now on either side of Bath Abbey there are churches which have spires. They're equidistant. So if you can find one, look the same distance the other side of the Abbey and you'll find the other one. The area, they roughly correspond to where the old north and the south gates at one time let you in or out of the city. And so the area between those spired churches is how big Bath was for most of its history. For over 1700 years Bath was quite small. Samuel Pepys, a diarist in the 17th century, said that it took him less than 20 minutes to walk around the city walls. But in 1702, Bath had a visitor, and then the city began to grow very quickly. Now she was our Queen Anne, who we sometimes call Brandy Annie. She suffered from the gout, and she said she had to drink brandy to escape the pain. But her doctors told her if she wanted to be cured, she must come to Bath and drink the waters coming out of the ground here. So this is what she did. Her courtiers followed her here, but they were very disappointed with the accommodation available in Bath, and so to make them want to come on a regular basis, a new city was specially planned and then built up onto the hills to the right of Bath Abbey. Many of the houses you see up there on the right-hand side come from the 18th century. That's where we were touring through the circus and the Royal Crescent earlier on. What looks like a UFO about to take off beyond the city there, well, there are actually 3 gas holders there, very ugly buildings, which we hope will be removed fairly soon. And beyond the city, on the left, you're looking at the Mendip Hills. That's where the Romans first came to this part of Britain to dig lead and silver out of the ground, and some of the lead is still lining the Roman baths to this day, 2,000 years later. In the Mendip Hills is a little village of Cheddar. That's where the cheese gets its name from. Now, immediately in front of the bus is the start of the Cotswold Hills, and an area very popular with the royal family, who all like chasing after the fox. This is good fox-hunting country here. Prince Charles, Princess Anne, his sister, and several of their cousins all have their country homes in the Cotswolds. The hill immediately in front of the bus is Salisbury Hill. That's an Iron Age fort. That's where the ancient Britons would have lived before the Romans built a settlement down in the valley here. And the other side of it is Pacific. St. Swithin's has connection with Jane Austen. That's where her mother and father were married, and where the Reverend Austen is buried. Now, Jane mentioned Bath in nearly every one from Bath and disliked Bath very much. Persuasion and Northang Abbey, take that. Jane did like this park on the right. This is the Sydney Gardens, named after the same man in Sydney as named after. This is the oldest park in the city. Rich people used to gather here so they could admire one another. Go dancing. Inside the grounds of the park, the museum, and a few years ago they were donated to Gates. Thomas Gates had a studio in the service of the young man, and he would paint visitors to Bath for £5. This painting was bought outside of closing evidence of the beyond the meadowlands, which are very wet, so houses are back on the ground. So we say, building them down in the seawater along the south coast. And outside St. Ives on the left-hand side, end of them ends in the city inside of Boston. At this end of the street we haven't got very much to show you. There's a modern fountain made of concrete. Bath people call it the ash spray. And there's a very old shop front in the left with a royal coat of arms on the top. Over 100 years old. But not really survived. Newly painted, but the street like the first building. You can see we're on the bridge. There's the river flowing in the shore. Well, that completes the country part of the tour. We're now making